Hi, I'm Shay, and I am interviewing Maeve Novak, a sophomore English major at Fairfield University. Maeve, how often do you read?
Um, I'd say it depends on what time of year it is. If it is during the school year, I read far less for pleasure than I would for school. However, during the summer, I'd say I read just about every single day.
Every day? Do you read at the beach?
I actually rarely go to the beach.
Uh,
I normally work every day, so
uh,
reading is like a fun little escape I can do in the evenings.
and what do you like to read when you do read?
Um, Honestly, anything that's good. Any good book. It could be fantasy, fiction, nonfiction. So long as it's good and has a good plot and is well written, I'm happy.
And what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of His Window and Disappeared by Jonas Jonasson. It is a Swedish book translated into English, and it is incredible. Some of the best writing I have ever read, and it is an incredible story. It just, I could not say enough good things about it. It's absolutely perfect
Is
in
he your
every
favorite
way.
author?
No, he's actually my second favorite author. My favorite author is Ronald Dahl. So he wrote the BFG and like 11 other books. And that was actually how I first fell in love with reading to begin with. So he's my favorite author for that reason.
Interesting. What's your favorite genre?
I would definitely say fiction. Now that could like range from like fantasy fiction to just realistic fiction. I just think that there's so much you can do with something that isn't real, like by just playing off your imagination. There's so many different stories; it's absolutely unlimited. While like nonfiction or other genres might just limit yourself to what's actually happened. But I'd rather go off the road a little bit, wander through the woods, climb a couple trees, and see what happens from there. Maybe fly a unicorn. Who knows?
So does that mean you don't like romantic novels?
No, I do, but you can put romance into just about any kind of novel. Um, I've read fantasy fiction novels that have incredible romance stories that actually teach you a lot more about what a healthy relationship is than a nonfiction book. I've read books where they like the first book is what you would think a very healthy relationship, a very strong female character, like very independent and going on this like crazy adventure. But in the second book, like you start to realize how abusive her fiance is, and it's terrifying to find like that. Like I always thought like my standards were higher than that, and that like I would never fall for it. But like I, in a sense, through the main character, the main girl character, I fell for her fiance, only to find like how cruel, how damaging, how cruel it was, and how she was quite literally dying because of this relationship. Both mentally, physically, she was deteriorating, and was being like absolutely abused. And yet, like it took me far longer than it should have to realize that, oh, she should really go away, because I was rooting for the relationship so hard until about halfway through the book when he got very physically violent, and I was like, maybe this isn't a good idea.
Kind of late, don't you think?
Yeah, a little.
Who's your favorite character from literature?
So that would be the main character of my favorite book, The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of His Window and Disappeared. His name is Alan. He is over 100 years old. He has gone, and like the book tells about, it goes back and forth through flashbacks from the beginning of his life to the point where he climbed out of the window of his old folks' home on his 100th birthday, to like the current day, on his 100th birthday and on. And he is spontaneous, wild, like it is just so funny. One of my favorite quotes from that book is when Alan said that his tongue only slipped twice in his life, when he told the Americans how to build the atomic bomb and when he told the Russians how to build the atomic bomb. So if that gives you a little bit of an idea, like he fought on both sides of the Spanish Revolution, like he is just, I want him to be my best friend.
But is it fiction?
It is fiction.
Yeah.
100% fiction. I highly doubt that he went drinking with American presidents, or had Kim Jong-un sit on his lap as a little boy and cry. But it's very interesting.
Is that a book you would want to reread, and why?
So I would love to reread it, but like I'm in love with this book. I own this book. I give it out to everyone I can. And I will reread it at times. But like, if I ever have like Alzheimer's, dementia, if I ever have like temporary amnesia, like I have a list of things that like I want people to give me. Like I want to forget that I ever read that book just so that I can reread it again and experience it for like the first time.
What is your favorite movie made from a book?
So that would definitely be Pride and Prejudice, the Keira Knightley version, even though I know it's less accurate. I just think it's a little better done, although it may not be as in sync with the actual time period and the plot, because there are a couple more liberties that are taken with the movie than would stereotypically be, or not stereotypically, but would ordinarily be conventional for that time period. Um, I love the movie. It is my favorite movie. I will watch any version of Pride and Prejudice that I can find. I have seen just about anything under the sun about it, but I am actually not a big fan of the Pride and Prejudice book by Jane Austen. I'm not a fan of her writing just because I feel like she tells you what happens instead of showing you. And like, for example, at the end of the book when she says how they got engaged, she literally says, and they were engaged. And I was like, how did they become engaged? Did he like get down on one knee? Like, what did he say to her? Like, what did she say back? And there was so much climax, like so much leading up to that point, that I felt like it came a little bit short. And I understand that like a lot of things like you can't really say, she couldn't have written a lot of description that I would have wanted like in the current day, because back then a lot of it was hush hush, hush hush, and it was just you didn't talk about certain things, but at the same time, like, it would have been nice to, even if it was like G-rated, like to at least have something, like some declaration of love, like he did in the first proposal, but which was honestly hilarious. But I don't know.
Do you think if she wrote in like modern day that she would be more descriptive than she was in the past?
That I'm not sure about, only because there are things that she could have written about that scene and other scenes in there as well that would not have been seen as like a faux pas or anything in her day. It would have, like, she could have made it proper. I think that if it was written in the current day, it would have been a little, like,
scandalous,
a little bit more raunchy,
yeah.
For two people falling in love. But I think she would have stuck with the whole telling, not showing, unless she was taught otherwise, just because I feel like that's part of her style. But I think part of the reason why she became so famous is because she was a prominent women author during the time period where women were not any of that
like valuable
sort. Yeah, no. So she sort of went out of the realm of comfort in terms of society and what they valued.
Do you feel that because of the way she wrote during that time period that it's essential and everyone should read it? Or if it's not, what book is?
Well, so I feel like everyone should have a broad understanding of literature, both historical, modern. I think everyone should have a little bit of an experience reading every kind of genre. So this way they can really gauge and get their own opinion on it. Even if they don't like it, I mean, even if like you only read like the first chapter or something and decide like, oh my gosh, this is awful. Like I never want to read this type of novel again.
Yeah.
Like that's fine, just as long as you try it. I think it's definitely good to have read a lot of historical books as well, just because their importance in the world is something that like continues to exist today. Like everyone should have some concept of Shakespeare, just because there are so many references to it today and it's so important. maybe a little bit of like the Iliad and the Odyssey, or at least some concept of that, um, just to sort of have a stronger idea of how everything works. But frankly, in the end, I think everyone should just read whatever they like to read, and there should be no judgment on that, or on whether or not certain types of novels are quote unquote like acclaimed literature. I think it's entirely in the view of the beholder, and I have read like supposedly like fantastic adult books, and I've found that their writing is not as good as certain authors who might write, for example, like young adult books. Like,
Yeah.
it's, you can't really do it just solely on the genre. Everything has its ups and downs.
You mentioned that you should at least try to read a chapter, and if you hate it, just put it down and forget about it. Did you ever have an experience like that where you just like hated a piece of literature?
Oh, I have picked up so many books, started reading it, hated it, and like put it back on the shelf. I can't even give you specific examples. That's just a very common occurrence. In fact, I think I started reading a book, although I probably stopped reading it because I ran out of time, and school started up again. But it just it if it doesn't like hook you, in a lot of like you a lot of adult novels like where um like authors will like try and like copy what like other novelists have done instead of doing something of like their own. It gets very difficult for it to be like nearly as good as it could have been had they just stuck with their own style.
That's cool. How has literature helped you understand yourself, others, and the world?
um I'd say so. Literature, I always say it. I feel like I've lived over 1,000 lives. Like I genuinely feel like I have so much experience just because I've read so many books, and by reading all of these books, I sort of pick up different lives, if that makes sense. So,
You become the character.
well, I gain their experiences.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I mean, I would never say that I've like been through the Holocaust, but like after never, I would never say that. But having read Elie Wiesel's Night, I could definitely say I have a concept of at least his
Of the
experiences
Holocaust.
of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And having read other people's accounts, like I understand that part. But like even reading like complete fiction, I even though like I'm not learning some sort of a history of the world, I'm reading um, like different people's reactions, different people's experiences, and whether that's between relationships, whether that's internal conflicts with themselves that make me reflect on my own self, or even like conflicts with the world where like they have to stand up and fight for something that they believe in, and it makes me wonder like, okay, what in this world do I would I want to fight for
Yeah.
that strongly? Like, what's that important for me to go and fight for?
It puts stuff in perspective.
It really does. It puts it into a lot of different perspectives. And I see the way a lot of people or a lot of characters will like go and make decisions and work through things. And in reality, like no fiction character or no character in general is just a character because it's all based off of what either an author would do or an author's experiences or what an author believes like someone would do. And so it's all like every character is built on a kernel of truth, whether that's a kernel of like the author's personality or someone else's like that's maybe close to them, and it's all valid. Like they're all valid experiences, even though some of them might be fiction or etc. It's just everything has a story to tell and everything has a lesson to be learned. It's just you might not see that, but you definitely learn a lot.
Do you think that the author's relationship with the main character is like essential to the book? Like in the development, I guess you could say.
I think so because if an author cannot feel a personal connection to the character that they're writing, even if like it's completely different in something they've never experienced, I think that it's important for them to really uh, just look at it. Sorry, I just like lost it. You wrote at a time. No, I think it's definitely important for an author to have a personal connection to the character because without it, all you have is sort of like this hollow shell. And with like a personal
It's not
connection,
real.
it's not because the personal connection that an author feels to the character, they subconsciously put in different details that might not even like be relevant to the storyline, but are like relevant to like who the character is. Like maybe just like what kind of outfit they're doing, or like different personality quirks, or different jokes that they'll crack. Just like walking, I don't know, into town, or just like walking somewhere, like different ways that they'll interact, or like different word choices. Like all of that builds up and makes a character. Um, and without like relating to it, even if it's like about an experience that's so completely like that you've never even seen before, like never even written before, have no experience with, it's important because otherwise there won't be that emotional connection. And if the author doesn't connect to the character, then the reader can't connect either.
Thank you so much for your time and input.
You're welcome anytime.